Good morning, everybody. A warm welcome to all that has joined us and made the time to be part of the session today. I will be handing over to Ms. Anissa Musa, who is the National Coordinator of the NSMSA, and she will be moderating today's session. Thanks.
Good morning again to everybody. Thank you, Melanie, for the introduction. Just to tell you that we're very excited. Welcome again to our first webinar, the NSM's first webinar for 2025. And we decided it's the best time, beginning of the year, when students are registering at university, when young people are thinking about what their year is going to look like, that we're going to focus on empowering teens and youth, building confidence and working on personal growth to prevent gender-based violence. We have an excellent program this morning. We have some very experienced and vibrant, energetic speakers this morning. We've got a jam-packed program. So we're hoping that you're going to enjoy this morning's session. I'm going to quickly take you a little bit through, I'm going to give you an overview of the program, but before I do that, just a little bit about the NSM. The National Charter Movement of South Africa is a registered organization with the National Department of Social Development, and we serve as an umbrella body for over 100 shelters, gender-based violence shelters all over South Africa, and we have a 24-hour shelter placement service. Melanie's posted the details. You can see it in the background. If any of you know of someone or need help, there's a toll-free number that you can call. So there's obviously a lot more I can tell you about the NSM, but I think we have a team waiting for us and we've got lots of information to share. So I'm going to proceed. Just to give you an overview of the program, we're going to be looking at the power of education, and Irfan Mangera is going to be taking us through that section. Remember, he's the lead speaker, but our other speakers will contribute to each of the topics as well. Irfan is a founding member of the Rise Mzansi, and he's a member of its National Leadership Collective. He's an activist, organizer, human rights educator, and community builder. He serves as the Youth Activism Program Manager at the Amit Kathrada Foundation prior to taking up formal politics, which entailed organizing, mobilizing, and developing social political consciousness of young people across 30 plus community-based youth activist clubs. Thank you, Irfan, for joining us this morning. I'm also going to introduce the other two guests this morning and then hand over to them. Our second session we're looking at is confidence and personal growth, and Anele Ndlovu. She's the founder of the Tea with Anele Ndlovu. Since August 2021. She's an activist, active citizen, women's empowerment and leadership activist, mental health activist, recovery and sobriety advocate, public speaker, coach, board member, marketing and communication and branding specialist, book enthusiast, aspiring public servant, mentor, mentee. So we can see our speakers are of great caliber this morning. Phineas Sabatsani, who will take us through preventing vulnerability to gender-based violence. He's an activist as well, focused on trauma awareness, human rights, and socioeconomic justice. He established the Ria Sana Foundation, a non-government organization that supports victims on gender-based violence, human trafficking, and the homelessness in Cape Town. His academic background includes studies in journalism, community development, trauma counseling, economic and governance and leadership. Currently, he's pursuing a master's degree in peace and justice within the Palestinian context. So I'm going to hand you over now to Irfan, who's going to take us through, and at the end, we'll have time for questions and answers. So enjoy this morning's session. Irfan, over to you.
Thanks so much, Anissa, and very good morning to everyone. It's such a wonderful opportunity to engage, and I look forward to the conversation that's going to be had and trying to learn from each other as best as possible. My name is Irfan Mangera, as introduced, and I'll be covering the section on education, and my fellow panelists will also contribute. And towards the end of the session, we will have question and answers to engage you as who've joined us this morning. This webinar really is an important one. It's a timely one, but it's also important to recognize that we are dealing with sometimes in specifically this context sensitive topics. And if you feel you may need a timeout, or you'd like to send a private message in the chat just to ask questions, we are sensitive to the fact that gender-based violence is a oftentimes difficult for many people, particularly victims who have experienced this. And so please do utilize the functions. You were introduced to Melanie and Anissa, both representing the National Shelter Movement. Please feel free to engage them as well. Right, so where do we begin? It's such a hard but yet important topic. We know and understand that today's session is going to attempt to cover a few elements around the GBV crisis and how we aim to uplift people so that they can become advocates against it. Young people building up their resilience against violence and vulnerability. But in order for us to do that, we must also set the tone to recognize that a lot of this is systemic and structural. And so we don't want to divorce that from this context. It's important that that's rooted within this discussion, but also that we will have subsequent webinars, and the NSM is planning subsequent webinars where they'll delve into a bunch of these topics in more depth. So given the time, just bear with us that we'll only be covering certain segments. And for me, that is education. As somebody who's qualified as an educator, who's come from that background, who's spent the better part of my life in community education, popular education, I felt it necessary that, we want to break this down into three particular segments. One, why is education a key to empowerment? Two, breaking the barriers. What are those barriers that we speak about and how do we overcome them? And then three, some practical tips around how does education help in facilitating, or what possible education means are there to access and support those who are affected by GBV, or those who want to actually become advocates and allies in the fight against gender-based violence. So we are directing this to teens and young people, and specifically the need for education obviously speaks directly to that constituency. Education, as we know it, is something that empowers you to learn, to grow, and to progress in life. And when we look at it through the lens of GBV, and particularly from building confidence, building resilience, building into yourself a sense of economic independence, education is the best vehicle for that purpose, because it allows you to gain skills that promote actually a healthy opportunity to actually get job, earn an income. And one of the most scary and glaring things that many young people are facing currently is that 200,000 plus young people are dropping out of school before they finish matric. And this stat is a worry, because what it means down the line is that that young person is left vulnerable, and the chances of getting an income or a job with dignity is far more difficult than those who have completed at least their matric, who have some legs to stand on, and therefore can go and pursue furthering their skills through skill centers, the TVET colleges and universities. And so one of the biggest worries that sits with my head, at least as an educator, is how do we stop that gap of young people who are dropping out of school, particularly because of familial issues, structural issues, issues of violence in their homes and in the communities that they come from. And we as a society and as a community should be encouraging an environment that makes sure we promote and particularly say to young people, our chances of a better life are best placed when we pursue an education. Yes, the job crisis and again, the economic crisis does bear on this particular problem. But nonetheless, the stats and research show you that it is better off if you get a matric towards job seeking. And so it's important that I start there to set some context. Education is more than just gaining information. It's about developing your skill set to be critical of mind, to understand your role in so broader society. So it's not just to produce someone for the market for a job, but it's about how you build a citizen who understands the need to contribute and what is their duty towards society as a whole. And that kind of holistic approach to education means that you develop tools around understanding stereotypes, the cultural norms of our society, gender roles, which often are those things that perpetuate violence. With that being said, I think individuals who tend to earn, who have economic safety, tend to have a step in the type of environment they live in or they can construct for themselves. Now, how does this, if you ask, create opportunities and develop self-confidence? Education doesn't just open the door for opportunity, but it builds somebody's understanding of themselves in that society. So when you speak about self-confidence, when you speak about developing your skill set, it rests within your investment in education. And again, we're speaking about education in its broad context. So yes, there's the schooling system, which is your formal education, but education also starts within your home, within your community. When you're going to church or mosque or synagogue or temple, you are engaging in a form of learning. And that's also a space in which you gain confidence in yourself and you access opportunities for learning and developing yourself. So education in that broad context speaks about you developing that ability. It also centers you and speaks about what is your personal value and helps develop that sense of worth, that you are not worthless in society. You are actually of value, and the society should value you and you value others. And when we start cultivating that culture, it shifts the needle in our understanding of every human life is sacred. Every element of society, particularly the natural world, is sacred. And so what do we need to do to protect it? What do we need to do to make sure we uplift it, keep it safe, keep it clean? And those are things that come with access to information, access to learning opportunities, understanding how systems work so that we can either shift that or help make it better in different ways. So what does it do from that perspective? It also gives you ability to assert yourself. As a young person, you start developing the skills of voicing opinion, not feeling sheltered to keep quiet when something is happening. Wrong or right, you have a view and you can share that view. And you can do so with a set of values that you also gain from education. Whether or not it's the tertiary education, a secondary or a primary, you develop a whole bunch of skills, but also a value base. And that's transmitted once again from your homes, from your parents or caregivers, from your community leaders, church leaders, etc. But also for me, in my case, becoming an activist actually was because teachers encouraged me to go and serve society. And so that's a confidence booster that I needed to take a step into this life of activism, into this life of servant leadership and committing to a better society. I want to go quickly into barriers of education, and thereafter we'll bring in my fellow panelists to hear their views as well around this particular point. I'm only going to mention three because I think there are many that we could go into and potentially open new dialogue on each of them and new webinars on each of them. But there are different benefits to education. Some actually promote far better opportunities than others. But in every single instance, it's a clear indication that with more education and investment in it and quality education, you're able to progress in life and grow. I happen to come from the fees must fall background, where in my first year of university, there was a mass protest across the country, the first time post-democratic South Africa that young people stood hand in hand to fight against a system that was denying young people access to education. while this was a very tertiary-centric movement, part of that barrier to access was that people or young people, particularly young Black people from marginalized communities or former disadvantaged communities, poor working class families, could not send their children and could not access uh, tertiary education because of how expensive it was, because of how limiting access was from a perspective of how many people were able to sign up per year, even though they had made it perhaps through the metric system. Now, that limitation is a structural problem. It limits your ability to access, but it's important to recognize that that movement in itself helped further the access issue. It forced government and private sector to realize and engage that an investment in education has a ripple effect across all social issues. The more people access and have a better quality education, the better their development outcomes are, where they're able to live more healthy lives, they're able to earn a better income and purchase food that is healthy, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see the picture I'm painting that has a ripple effect. That is one of the barriers, is that access to quality education, access to an environment of learning that is non-biased, that is non-stereotypical. Part of that is understanding gender roles. And oftentimes in the South African context, because of the traditional understanding of gender roles, the disproportionate burden is then left on young people, particularly young women, that limits their ability to access education fully. And this is seen in many ways, that they are forced to take on domestic responsibilities. They oftentimes don't have access to sanitary wear and so on, and are missing days of school because of that. And so that is a big barrier for particularly young girls who want to access and pursue education as a means to upliftment and development. I spoke briefly about the economics as a big one. If you don't have access to, in our system at least, those who across different class divides are able to access school, at least at a primary level and a secondary level. And this is because of government programs that allow for that access. The problem therein is whether or not it's of quality and what happens next. And so the economic limitations also force young people, particularly those who lead households or who have additional responsibilities at home to earn, are being encouraged rather to drop out of school and look for other forms of income so that they help the family at least put food on the table. Now, this is again a big barrier that has to be solved, because it limits young people's access and ability. And further down the line, it forces us to then try to upskill that said young person who now does not have access to or does not have a functional skill that can help in any form of productive labor. And lastly, I think societal pressures is another one where I'll end and then bring in my fellow panelists. Societal pressures are the kind of expectations placed on you to do a particular role or carry out some performance, right? This often is, if you think of young girls, it's discouraged, for sometimes young girls are said to, you need to just get married, find a rich husband, or find a husband that will care for you. But in pursuing that line of thinking, we limit young women's and young girls' particular ability to empower themselves, to develop that confidence that they can equally become a doctor, they can equally become a lawyer. And building on that set of equity and equality, we then start sharing the care roles that are often unpaid labor. We start sharing and we start challenging the norms that set aside young women from becoming the next CEO, becoming the next manager. And this has to shift, because it's a barrier that limits young women's access to the same role that men are doing, and if not sometimes doing it way better. And so that's an additional barrier that I think often comes when speaking about this particular issue. I'll just throw in one one story or example of someone who has represented overcoming deep barriers despite the odds. And her name is Malala Yousafzai, a Pakistani activist who fought for female education, who still fights for it till today, and who got shot, attempted assassination by the Taliban. And this was because of her advocacy from a very young age. As a young girl, she had pursued and been an advocate for girls' education. She's now helped transform millions of lives because of the work she's done to encourage investment into young women's education so that they become equal contributors in the society and help develop the type of society we want to live in. So with that in mind, perhaps Anele and Phineas, would you like to add on to this particular section on education?
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Over to you, Anele.
Thank you. Thank you for that. As I was listening to you, I was like, yeah, Irfan is really an educationalist and has all the stats and all the information. Thank you. That was knowledgeable and just paints the picture of how education, the role education plays, um, not just in terms of like in fostering one's life and prospering one's life, and also just against the vulnerabilities to GBVF. So what I wanted to share, and I've just written it down, so I'll just read through it. So for those who know me, I'm a big reader, and I read for leisure. I read to further empower myself and things like that. And so I want to encourage all of us on this call and those who will watch this recording later to encourage our teens and youth to read beyond their textbooks, to read for leisure. This encourages a spirit of learning that goes beyond the classroom and schooling times. You become interested in the world and what is going on around you. You ask more questions, you're open to other opportunities that are available to you. So you're not just stuck in, I need to study this because I've got a test. I'm actually taking an interest in my life and taking an interest of other things that are happening because you're not always going to be in school. So you need to be aware of other things that happen beyond the classroom. And then in the school settings, learners should take their schoolwork seriously and actively participate in lessons like life orientation. I think LO is a great start to open our children's eyes to different lifestyles and how the choices they make now could impact their lives at a later stage. In these lessons, they get taught, time management, about peer pressure, teenage pregnancy, and things like that. So if they then are just not like studying just to pass the test and do the assignments, but actually thinking this is going to aid me in my life, they'll be better able to see what is good, what is not good, what decisions to make that will be good for their lives. Active participation in their education will ensure they are empowered to thrive regardless of the struggles they may face. They'll be motivated to dedicate time to their learning. And then my last point on this is education through social media. So we can't run away from the fact that social media has captivated our teens and youth's minds. Most of their time is spent glued to a screen. We need to find ways to encourage teens and the youth to engage in and with motivating and empowering content. We know this won't happen all the time, but we need to try. Maybe we can give them topics to look up on their socials and they can feedback on what messages they got from the different people they watch. We can find creative ways to make social media educational and empowering and not just for fun and entertainment. It should be edutaining, because that's where they are. So we need to go to where they are and they'll be more open, I think, to the conversations like GBVF and things like that if we use the tools that they are using. We use the language that they are using, which they are getting from the socials. So it's us finding a way to use social media to be more educational and also just encouraging and being there to say, this is what's happening. What have you read? What haven't you read? What do you think about this? What is someone on TikTok saying about this particular issue? So those are just my points on the education parts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anela. You're bringing such relevant points because in a time like this where almost every young person is engaging in some form of online presence, whether it's Facebook, which is still widely used contrary to popular belief, or WhatsApp, or particularly TikTok, where lots of young people have been encouraged to become content creators and are sharing their lives openly. Part of that investment now is how do you use the platforms they're using to teach and train? And I like that view because it's again centering the young person in the journey of education and how to give them the tools necessary. And we hope perhaps we can encourage that type of outcome out of this webinar, that each of us go and at least put out something on our social media that encourages this type of shift of behavior, shift of thinking, to help young people see the hope at the end of the tunnel. Phineas, anything on your side that you'd like to contribute to the education discussion?
Yeah, I think, good morning, everyone. It's great to be with you. Yeah, I think there's two things, as I was listening to you guys, that kind of popped. I think specifically in South Africa, I think we need trauma-informed education. That is the first thing. In a sense of, having counselors and psychologists in our schools. Because I feel like our school system focuses so much on grades, on people's well-doing, not on people's well-being. And there needs to be a balance when it comes to that. I don't think many young people are struggling at school with their grades because they are stupid. I think there are things that are happening at home which have a lot to do with gender-based violence that need a safe environment to be processed. Teachers cannot be counselors. Teachers should be teachers. And unfortunately, we have teachers who end up becoming mentors and counselors because there's a need to address mental health with many of the students that we work with who are victims of gender-based violence. So I think our school system needs to be designed in such a way that is trauma-informed in terms of having educators who are trauma-informed, having principals who are trauma-informed, having counselors and psychologists present in our schools so that they can address some of these things that are happening at home so that these young people can actually thrive in our school systems in terms of their grades. I remember a few years ago, I went to Malawi, and I was a little bit ticked off because I realized that they have a school system in high school that does not allow young girls to be educated. So a lot of young girls can only go to school from primary school until pretty much that's it. If you're a girl, primary school is like, the limit. You cannot go to high school because a lot of young girls end up into child marriage or end up getting married at a very young age. And the school system has realized that, an educated girl is powerful. And the only way to control them is making sure that they're not educated enough. So I'm glad that you said that gender-based violence is a systemic thing, and we have enablers within our system in how it is structured. And that's the thing that we need to challenge, is very much the system that enables gender-based violence. And the last thing I want to say is that just because somebody is educated does not make them immune to abuse. I know of a lot of independent women who are a threat and being abused in the hands of narcissists because they are insecure about women being educated and any more money than them, and unfortunately they end up, being abused because they are educated. So yes, there's a lot of women who are abused because of lack of education, but there's also women who are abused because they are being educated. And I think it's important to note that yes, education is important. We need to educate people, but we also need to understand that also comes with some kind of abuse, because those women end up triggering a lot of insecurities within our system. So yeah, that's what I can add.
Thanks so much, Phineas, for such deep and reflective and important points. I see Anela hand shot up straight away. So I'm going to give you 1 minute to make a contribution, Anela, and then I'll wrap up the session and we'll move on to the second one.
Okay, thank you. So for me, it's a question to Phineas and maybe to you as well, Irfan, just based on what he has said, which is true, that even educated women, they are prone to abuse as well. But how do we mitigate that? Because we're talking about the power of education, in kind of preventing GBVF, but we do know that even educated, well-to-do women also go through abuse. So how can you, and maybe in the work that he's done, how do you mitigate that?
Cool.
Thank you.
Phineas, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Anele. I think that's why we, as an organization, we don't only work with victims, we also work with perpetrators. So we also understand, that gender-based violence does not only affect women, it also affects men. And traumatized people, hurt people, which is not an excuse, by the way. But we do understand that we we need to educate boys. We need to address issues of fatherlessness in our communities. We as much as we go into safe spaces and work with victims of gender-based violence, we need to go into prison, and work with those perpetrators so that when they leave prison, they don't repeat the same cycle. It gets broken somehow. So there needs to be a balance in terms of how do we break the cycle of gender-based violence. How do we work with victims, but how do we also work with perpetrators? So our job, we have a safe house where we work with women who are victims of gender-based violence, but we also go into prison to work with people who have done messed up things. And we try to counsel them and make sure that when they are reintegrated into the society, they're not reintegrated with the same mindset. There's a change of behavior in how they interact in the society. And we do something called restorative justice, where we bring the perpetrator and the victim to reconcile. But it's not a quick fix, 2-minute no rules kind of process. It is a long, painful process of truth and reconciliation. So we try to balance both sides because we are very much believing going upstream and disrupting the system more than blaming more than blaming, I don't know, what do they call, blaming people for not growing in toxic systems. So we try to engage with the foster system. We try to engage with prison in how it's structured and how they work with victims of gender-based violence, because that's another thing that we have learned within our organization is that pimps, gangsters, perpetrators are also victims of gender-based violence because of their childhood trauma. So that's something that we try to address within prison and within our foster system is also working with perpetrators who are victims of gender-based violence. So yeah.
No, and I'm sure we'll probably get a bit more from you pretty soon on some of that work and important work that's being done. And I think to conclude, the points just made in the last few minutes are a good segue, because one is this idea of education, not simply for the girl child, it's for everyone. Because if we want a vision of a society where everywhere is a safe space for all of us, that means everyone needs to understand that their role in society, how they behave in society, is shaped in a particular way that is socially acceptable, that we want and desire as a holistic space for everyone. And therefore, men are part of that 100%, because to learn about consent, to learn about engagement between each other, what respectful interactions look like, how to honor and uphold the law, but also just common humanly behavior is part of what is taught and needs to be emphasized. I want to also say that, you know, there's this misconception that we shouldn't engage those who are perpetrators, and that the system is just this vicious cycle. But we have to break that cycle, and to break it, we have to do a lot of the uncomfortable teaching and training and dialogue work that often my schools are not geared up for. I mean, I was a big advocate for what Phineas is saying, in that schools should have, especially in a South African context, psychologists and or counselors in every school. Our LO teachers often are not taken as seriously as they need to, and yet they are the ones who have at least when I qualified with a counseling certificate. All the other teachers in my year of study weren't able to get that. And so you're starting to see the disparities in how we're not gearing up. The system is not building that type of mechanisms to at least help curb this type of violence and social issue. But there's a lot to be said still. And so I'm going to prompt Anissa to probably introduce the next session, and then Anela can take over from there.
Thank you, Irfan, Anele, and Phineas for contributing to such a fruitful discussion. I think it's clear that this discussion could go on for very long. What comes to mind, and I think the message for me is that our work is a long process, and it includes at different levels, from prevention to healing to development. And I think there's lots of potential there. And, you know, we have spoken about taking this further and leading it into some kind of a youth program, because I definitely think that it's something, I know words that came up was investment, Irfan. And I think that's our youth are definitely worth the investment, because it speaks to the future of South Africa as well. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand you over now to Anele, who is going to lead us into the conversation around confidence and personal growth. Anele, over to you. Sorry, just before you go, Anele, just a kind reminder to everybody who's registered, if you haven't registered, the link has been posted on the chat. If you could just complete the registration. Thank you.
All right. Okay, thank you. Thank you to Irfan, as we had I had mentioned earlier, for the education part. So as I think when Anissa was reading my profile, she mentioned, you know, mental health advocates and sobriety and recovery advocates and things like that. So I work a lot in the mental health space. And in the work that I've done a lot of work around, you know, GBV activism as well. And GBVF does have an impact, you know, because it causes you stress as the victim, the survivor. And I'm sure, as Phineas has said, even the perpetrator, you know, so you go through stress, you go through depression, you have anxiety because your life has just been turned upside down. So what I want to focus on is what you can do for your mental health if you are a victim or a survivor of GBVF. And even if you're not, I'm hoping that what I will share, I think and believe it will be valuable to you as well. Because when you are not okay emotionally or mentally, it impacts in different areas of your life. in terms of young people, teens, it impacts their focus at school, it impacts their studying time. You become moody, you start isolating yourself, you don't want to be around people, you may rely on substances to numb your pain. So our aim is to help you to be more emotionally and mentally sane and stable. It is to equip you with techniques, skills, and the knowledge so that when the storms come and lives, as young people like to say, you'll be able to withstand the stress, the anxiety, and the pressure. And I think what we need to take from today, and also just to encourage our young people to know and let our young people know, is things will happen. The struggles will come, the storms will come, and life will happen, but it's not the end of the world. Because I think what I've noticed now is a lot of young people think then it's the end of the world. It's something that I went through as well personally, but it's not. There is help, and settings like this, discussions like this are there to empower us and to help us. And just with what I'm saying now and going to the points that Phineas made and Irfan as well, in terms of having counselors and at schools, on Tuesday, I gave a talk at a high school to grade 11 learners, where they do have an in-house counselor there, a psychologist, who invited me to come and speak to the young people, because she was like, she has sessions, one-on-ones, group sessions with them. But she wanted to bring someone from the outside just to show the teens that it's not as them thing or just a school specific thing. Other young people are going through what they go through. Because I think sometimes you internalize and you personalize what it is that you're going through, and you feel like there is no one who's going to understand, no one who's going to help you, and things like that, which is not the case. It's just making sure that the information is there and it is shared, just as we are doing today. So I want to focus on just 3 areas. It's around vision boarding, so goal setting, prioritizing yourself, self-confidence, and healthy relationships. And I'm going to share so I have a column in my town's community paper, one of the community papers that we have. I have a monthly column there where I write on issues impacting mental health. And I've written about, the power of vision boards on your mental health, how self-confidence can boost your mental health, and healthy relationships, because in a relationship, whether it's a romantic, things like that, and you don't know if it's a good or a bad relationship, and that impacts on your mental health, and that can lead you to different forms of GBVF, which we do want to prevent and eradicate. So just, you can just give me a moment. Okay. So I'm just going to read. So the first one is the power of vision board well-being. And whenever I do my columns, I start, it's just as a motivator, that as you read this, you're motivated, So the quote I have here is, create the highest, grandest vision for your life, because you become what you believe. About vision boarding, because vision boards have changed my life and always inspire me to chase my goals and reach for my dreams. In the 8 years that I have been hosting vision board picnics, I have seen the positive impact had on many people. Vision boards are a great self-awareness, self-confidence boosting tool. As you are doing your vision board, you connect with self, aligning your hopes and dreams with the universe. You are inspired to achieve all that is from your heart and now on your vision board. What is a vision board and what is its purpose? A vision board is a visual representation of your desired outcomes of your goals and dreams. A vision board is not just a collage of images and words, but a way of activating your creative visualization skills and aligning your actions with your intentions. The purpose of a vision board is to help you clarify your vision, remind you of your priorities, and inspire you to take action. A vision board works by activating your subconscious mind, which is responsible for storing your beliefs, memories, and habits. The positive impacts of vision boarding on your mental health. Visualization is a useful tool to enhance your life. Visualization increases your belief in self in achieving your goals. Vision boards motivate you to achieve whatever goals you have. Art engagement and creative outlets like vision boards have been found to lessen stress, anxiety, and depression. You have an ability to enhance performance and improve your well-being. Your focus and attention are positively impacted. You have emotional engagement with positive emotions like joy, excitement, and inspiration. There is cognitive reinforcement, meaning there is alignment of thought, beliefs, actions with desired outcomes. Positive reinforcements are proven to have positive neuropsychological effects as it boosts your mood and promotes emotional health. You get to de-stress as you do your vision board. The brain assigns a higher value to images than words on a to-do list. And looking at your vision board before you sleep increases the chances of the images being featured in your thoughts and dreams and you remembering them when you wake up. The benefits of having a vision board. You get clear on your goals, you define your goals, you break them down into achievable steps, and you create a clear roadmap. It helps you grow, shifts your mindset, you are intentional about your life, you connect to different areas of your life, you feel happy, it improves chances of success, increase. It's a source of inspiration and motivation. It provides clarity and reminder of priorities, a useful visualization and accountability tool. You unleash creativity and intuition to discover new ideas and solutions, can help attract more opportunities and resources, helps express gratitude for what you have already achieved. You recognize unhealthy patterns and bad habits, leads you to live a healthier lifestyle, boosts your self-confidence, and you live in your purpose. And then I ended off this article saying, enjoy living in your vision board. Enjoy using your vision board to being the best version of yourself. Enjoy using your vision board to be more intentional and to live your purpose. You are all you have. You are the one person you'll spend the rest of your life with. Make sure that you make the most of your life. Live your best life for you. So as you can see, the topic for my session is a lot around personal growth and self and building your self-confidence. And that's what, for me and for other people that I've helped put vision boards together, it has helped them do. It's because you have to focus on every area of your life. What is it that I want to do for my career, for my business, for my relationships, for my spiritual health, for social impacts and things like that. And when you are intentional and focused, you see, okay, I need to change this, or I need help in these certain ways. But it gives you a holistic view of the kind of life that you to live, which brings in the education element of it, because you need to know yourself and be aware of yourself. The next one that I want to read is on self-confidence. Okay. So it's titled, Having High Self-Confidence is Good for Your Mental Health and General Well-Being. And the quote that I used here was, your self-confidence is the ultimate key to success. Believe in yourself and you will be unstoppable, close quote. What is self-confidence and why is it important for us to focus on it, especially when it comes to our mental health? Self-confidence is an attitude about your skills and abilities. It means you accept and trust yourself and have a sense of control in your life. You know your strengths and weaknesses well and have a positive view of yourself. You set realistic expectations and goals, communicate assertively, and can handle criticism. Self-confidence is having to tell the truth about who you are, what you like, and what you believe. The above describes someone who has a healthy and high sense of self-confidence. Unfortunately, some people do not have a positive view of themselves and so have average or low levels of self-confidence. This negative view of themselves or life has an impact on their mental health as they have anxiety, stress, and depression. Let's look at what can cause low self-confidence and also the signs of someone who has low self-confidence. Okay, causes of low self-confidence: cultural background, childhood experiences, trauma, parenting style, bullying, harassment, humiliation, gender, race, sexual orientation discrimination, perfectionism, comparison to others, feeling your life is going nowhere, social media and the media in general, mental health issues like anxiety and depression, body image and feelings about appearance, the level of support you have around you, achievements or skills levels, feeling the need to fit in with others, relationship problems with family, friends, or a partner. Signs of a low self-confidence: feelings of self-doubt, passive or submissive behavior, difficulty trusting others, feeling inferior to others, overly sensitive to criticisms, you don't trust yourself, you're always comparing yourself to other people, you are a people pleaser, you don't have boundaries, negative view of yourself and life, you have trouble making and keeping friends, you feel little or no control over your life, and fear of failure. Having a healthy level of self-confidence matters. Confidence helps us feel ready for life's experiences. We see ourselves and the world in a more positive way. When things don't work out the way we have planned, having a high level of self-confidence helps us to be hopeful, trust that things will work out, and we try again. High levels of self-confidence can help us reach our full potential and reach our goals and dreams. How to boost your self-confidence: recognize and emphasize your strengths. Reward and praise yourself for efforts and progress. When you stumble on hardship, treat yourself with love and kindness. Don't focus too much on failure. Set realistic and achievable goals. Do not expect perfection. Set and maintain boundaries. Respect your boundaries and other people's boundaries. Slow down when you feel negative emotions. Recognize that past negative life experiences do not dictate your future. Express your feelings, beliefs, and needs directly and respectfully. Seek counseling to help you deal with issues that cause your low self-confidence. Okay, and then lastly and very quickly, so that I can give an opportunity to Irfan and Phineas if they'd like to add anything to this session. It's healthy relationships are good for your mental health. The quote is, be with someone who is good for your mental health, someone who brings you inner peace, someone who challenges your bad habits but supports your process of change. And that's when I started the article saying that someone can be a romantic partner, a parent, a sibling, a child, a neighbor, a colleague. That someone can also be yourself. And that's what we want for you to aim to, and you being that and having a healthy relationship with yourself. We were created for connection, which means we're created for relationships. Before we get into the crux of the topic, let's define what relationships are. Relationships are a way in which two or more people are connected for the state of being connected. And I think I can see Irfan there, and I'm looking at the time as well. So let me just go through signs of healthy relationships. And as we go through them, kind of see if do I have, healthy relationships with myself and other people. So there's trust and honesty, respect, open communication, you support each other, spending time together, maintain boundaries, conflict resolution, you like each other, practice active listening, empathy, you appreciate each other, shared decision making, affection, have fun together, allow each other space, independence, commitment, kindness, compassion, and patience. And I think I'll leave it there for now.
Thanks so much, Ndele. I think they are so rich and so full of information and tips and how to build that kind of confidence and self-awareness. I think what we'll do now is go straight to Phineas. I am conscious of our time, so to give people an opportunity to ask questions, there is one that was dropped in the chat for you, Ndele, so you can answer it. But aside from that, I think Phineas, perhaps you can kick us off with the third session, and then we can go into Q&A led by Anissa.
All right. Yeah, Anele, you triggered some few things, but because of time, I don't think we'll be able to dive into some of the things that you mentioned. But I'll open with saying, based on what you said, so that we there's a sequence to what I'm going to be going into. One of the things that I wrote as you were speaking is that gender-based violence thrives in isolation. Most of the people that we work with were being abused or are victims of gender-based violence is because they were isolated and then abused. And it's very difficult to abuse somebody who is in community with others. So I think it's important to mention that we thrive and heal in community. Community is an essential part of us being human beings who are rooted in empathy. All of you know about Ubuntu, about being connected with our humanity and understanding that if you are hurt through relationship, it's going to take relationships to heal you. That's why in my field, they say the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, but human connection. So human connection is an important part of dealing with trauma and dealing with addiction. So it's important to kind of note that. Just to go into my session, I'm not going to speak from so much a lot of head knowledge, but from my experience as a man who is running an NGO that works with women who are victims of gender-based violence, homelessness, and human trafficking in a sense of gangsterism. So I call gangsterism human trafficking because they use the same things, sex, drugs, and money. So it's the same mindset, and they use the same thing to control and to abuse. And my experience as a man, which is one of the things that I get a lot, why did you feel as a man to start an NGO that helps women? And they said that that is not normal, but it needs to be normal, because gender-based violence is not a woman issue or a children's issue. It's a human issue. And it's going to take both genders, all different genders, to kind of fight against the systemic, but also individual issue. And all of this is rooted in education. Like I said before, the women that we have in our space, one of the things that we realized is that because of lack of education, vulnerable for abuse. Because of lack of finances, a lot of them were in the hands of gangsters who used money to manipulate and control them. That's why in our space, one of our exit plans with the women that we have in our house is that they exit with a job and with a place to stay, and they have a good relationship with their children until they have these three things or four things, which is community. They don't exit, because we realize that being financially stable is one of the things that prevents the ladies that we work with from being used by narcissists. So we understand the importance of them knowing their identity, knowing their purpose, having a sense of belonging. We have this thing in our house where we have like big mirrors for the ladies to look at themselves and affirm themselves. and know that they are beautiful, they are worthy, not because there's a man in their lives or there are children in their lives, but they are worthy and they are important. They are beautiful, and that is very much internal rather than external. So, like I said before, our education is not just about having skills to get a job. Very much of what we do as a foundation is talking a lot about character, about the ladies knowing who they are, and even knowing whose they are, because we are a Christian organization as well. And we try to holistically address homelessness, not in a sense of lack of a house or a job, but also lack of not knowing who you are at your core. Being emotionally, what does it mean to be emotionally homeless? What does it mean to be psychologically and mentally homeless? Because, what does it mean to be spiritually homeless? Because homelessness is not just you have a nice house, because I know a lot of people who live in nice houses and drive nice cars, but they are empty and lonely and depressed and homeless. So we try to be very holistic in our education. And we don't focus only on giving people skills, but also how do we address mental health with the ladies that we have in the house. So character is very important. Skills, giving them practical skills is very important. Making sure that they are financially stable and they don't depend on a man for money is very important, because we have seen how gangsters use sex, drugs, money to control and manipulate the women that we work with. So having a sense of self-esteem is very important. There's a saying that I learned that where identity is not known, abuse is inevitable. When people know who they are, they have boundaries. And when people have boundaries, it's not easy to just disrespect them. Not saying that there are people who are abused, even when they know their identity and know who they are. But the women that we work with, unfortunately, a lot of them have allowed themselves to be treated like, sorry for my French, crap, because of how they perceive themselves. So we're trying to change the way they see themselves so that they interact with the world in a way that they attract respect and they take space and they don't conform to any space, and they become independent but in community with other people, because that's the safe net of accountability and responsibility. It is much difficult to conquer a woman who is in community with others than a woman who's isolated. So we're trying to bring those elements of community within our space, because I believe courage is best in community. Success is best in community. So community is a very crucial point of what we're trying to do, and also making sure that when people are sober, they stay sober. When people are confident, they stay confident. But that has a lot to do with where they are planted, the community that they live in, the people that they surround themselves with. Within my space, we speak a lot about places, things, and people. Those are the places, those are things that kind of trigger people. What kind of people are you associating yourself with? What kind of places do you go to? What kind of things do you surround yourself with? So we try to be as holistic as possible. Not that people should run away from triggers, because if we're all gonna run away from triggers, we're gonna run for the rest of our lives. But we try to make sure that people are confident enough to take the bull by its horns, which is gender-based violence, and not be muted or be told when to speak. And as a man, I'm very aware of being in those spaces. Whenever I see women, I have privileges as a Black man that I'm very aware of, privileges that some of my sisters in this group don't really have. And I think it's very important that men become safe men, but also are aware of their own flaws and create safe spaces for women to be seen and to be known. So yeah, I think just to speak about, I think you guys know about, narcissistic behaviors, especially empathetic people. In my studies, we spoke a lot about how narcissistic people are attracted to empathetic people, to nurturing people. And we have seen that a lot of times. And a lot of what we try to do is just be empathetic, be kind, but within boundaries. Don't allow people to just walk all over you or talk with you any way that they want. And yeah, we trying to create the women who know themselves, who know, that they're not just women here to just make children and be domesticated. But they are women who have dreams and they have desires, and those dreams and desires need to be met. But people like myself, sometimes we can get in the way of that. So my job as a man is just to move some of these obstacles that we have created for women. Yeah, recognizing warning signs of manipulation or abuse behaviors. I think I've touched on that a little bit. Practical steps to stay safe. Like I said, we don't especially for victims of gender-based violence, people don't just need a shelter. They need a trauma-informed safe space. Because what I tell people a lot of times, especially with homeless people that I work with, one thing that the people that I work with will tell you is that they don't need shelter. They don't need food. They don't need clothes. They need community. They need a sense of belonging. So you can have a nice building, but if that building is not trauma-informed and it does not have carers who actually care, don't expect people to come into that space and to heal. I think as carers, sometimes we need to learn how to care really well. And that's one of the things that we do. We don't only work with people who are broken, we also work with people who are helping people. Because I realize people that are helping people are not very good at helping people. So we need trauma-informed safe spaces that create safe places for people to be vulnerable, for people to be soft, because so many of the women that we work with, they have to be strong everywhere that they go and have to prove a point everywhere that they go, because we created a system where women have to be strong. But most women, or the ladies that we work with, tell us all the time that they don't want to be strong all the time. They want to be soft, they want to be vulnerable. But they live in society where they have to be strong, because if you are homeless and living on the street, you have no choice. Either you're going to get into a relationship, not because you want to get in a relationship, but just to have somebody to protect you at night, but in exchange for sex. And that will lead to drugs and other things as well. So we need to create trauma-informed safe spaces that are rooted in belonging and community. Because homeless people would rather choose a community on the street than to choose a shelter that does not have community. And that is not even trauma-informed. So it's not that people choose to be on the street. We have buildings that are not trauma-informed, and we have people that work with people who are vulnerable, who are not trauma-informed. So it's not just about blaming homeless people. It's about creating systems of care, which is very important in the work that we try to do. Yeah, I mean, we usually, I think, our relief, rehabilitation, and reintegration program is very much rooted in partnership. I don't think one organization can solve social and economic issues that we're dealing with in this world. It takes a collective to fight against unjust systems and to combat gender-based violence. So we with our relief program, we work with different organizations. With our rehabilitation programs, we work with different organizations. With our integration program, we work with different organizations. So we work with churches, we work with businesses, we work with government institutions. So because we realize as an organization that we cannot do everything. So partnerships are a key part of what we are trying to do within our work. So we're not the alpha and omega of everything. We don't know everything. I think the key point has always been partnership and sharing resources and doing everything in community with others. Because against us, They don't like collective people. I work with gangsters as well, but I realized that their weak points is when people come together and they fight against them. But they thrive so much in isolating and killing people. So yeah. Community support and resources. Like I said, I'm based in Cape Town, so we do some work with Sister Incorporated. We do some work with Police Abafazi. We do a lot of work with Saki Bagman. We do a lot of work with different shelters across Cape Town with our relief program, where we build relationships, refer, and follow up. And I say follow up because a lot of people are not interested in helping people. They're interested in getting rid of people. For example, more homeless people. For a lot of people, it's not a matter of putting somebody to a shelter. It's getting rid of them in their own community because they don't like seeing them, because they make them uncomfortable. So what we try to do is build relationship, refer, and follow up, then hold the organization that works with those people accountable. Because again, we cannot continue to blame the seed for not growing in a toxic environment. So sometimes the victim is not the problem. The organization that they are being referred to is the problem. And if they're not trauma-informed, don't expect the person that you refer to the organization to get the help that they really need. They need to be holistic in how they address things. And if they are a Christian organization, they should not spiritualize things all the time. They need to understand that human beings are made holistically. If you want people to be whole, you need to address the whole body. So mental health, emotions, like you need to bring the whole thing in, and not just focus on one way of recovery. Because also we live in a diverse country with different religions, with different sexualities. It is very important to be mindful of that. We're a Christian organization, but we are very much trauma-informed to the point where we are very inclusive in how we help people. If you are homeless, we don't care very much about your sexuality or your religion. The fact of the matter is that you want help and you want to be restored. And again, it's a systemic thing as well, where a lot of organizations, they're very selective in who they're helping, but we need to move away from that. If somebody's in need, we need to help them. And it should never have anything to do with race or sexuality or their religious beliefs. So those are some of the obstacles sometimes that we kind of face in the work that we are doing, but we challenge them and push back all the time, because we're not just an organization that tries to rehabilitate people, but we also advocate for the rights of victims. But also, like I said from the beginning, that we not only work with victims, we also try to work with perpetrators so that we break the cycle of gender-based violence. We can't just work with women, we also need to work with boys, we also need to work with men. So we try to bring that balance so that we are holistic in our approach when it comes to dealing with social issues in our community. So I will stop there because I think there's a lot of questions, but also because we don't have a lot of time to dive into more of these things. We can speak further if you would like to engage further, after this session. So I'll keep it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Phineas. That was very, very insightful. I think a lot of things kind of spoke very well to factors that were brought up by Irfan and Anele. I think I love the fact that we have to work with relationships and relationships with ourselves, and the responsibility that we have to ourselves, but also that the healing process is something that long-term, whether it's be the perpetrator or the survivor. So just going back to some questions, I see Penelope has requested an example of a vision board, Anele. That's the one. And then Lorato says, what is the best or feasible way to prevent low self-esteem, abuse, egoism, narcissistic behavior before it manifests, especially in children, as we are aware that the root cause is from young ages, and also most importantly, how can young women and girls better understand that they are not meant to be victims or silent?
Thanks, Anissa. I think the vision board question, perhaps Anile and Phineas, there's one around behavior, you both can answer. I think you're both best placed for that.
Okay, thank you. I'll start off with the vision board one. I'm going to just on the chats put my social handles there because we do give guides on like step-by-step guide on how to do your vision board. It will need another 2 hours if I had to explain. So if you can just check out whether it's Instagram, Facebook, X, you will find those guides there. And I'm happy that people are open to them. It's life-changing. So you will see that as the year progresses into next year and other years, how your personal growth is elevated and you are more in touch with yourself as well. Okay, over to you, Phineas. I was going to say, Irfan, that the behavior one is definitely for Phineas to answer based on the work that he does.
A lot of pressure here. Two things: where people are born and where people live matters. I often say that we need to stop blaming the seed for not growing in toxic environments. So a lot of parents, sometimes they will send their children for counseling, but sometimes it's like parents that need counseling. It's the teacher that needs counseling. It is the boss or the politician that needs counseling. Because as leaders, we create environments for people either to be heard or to succeed. So environment is very important when it comes to people's healing. So especially if you want to address childhood trauma, or generational trauma or systemic trauma, man, I can spend the whole day on this. But like I said, usually if I'm interacting with a young man who is a victim of abuse, I don't only deal with the victim. I also try to make sure that I engage with the parents, and I assess the environment in which that child is living in, so that I don't blame the behavior. Remember, behavior is a byproduct of a deeper rooted thing. And a lot of people focus on addiction. Drugs, alcohol, all these things that we using to medicate ourselves are not the problem. Like the problem is not addiction, the problem is trauma. But a lot of times we have a system that focuses on the fruit and does not focus on the root. And the root is trauma. And all these things that we use that ends up putting us into addiction are a behavioral things. So if you want to change behavior, you have to change the root of the problem. But if you focus only on the fruit and you don't deal with the root, we're gonna continue to have the cycle, So that's why I tell a lot of organizations that work with drug addicts to stop focusing on drug addiction, but to focus on trauma. Because once one can heal from trauma, they do not need drugs. So I think I will answer it that way in a short time that we have.
Thank you so much for that, Phineas. I think the message there was around addressing emotional and behavioral manifestations of underlying issues. And you use the word intergenerational. And yes, when we talk about systems, it comes from somewhere. So thank you for that, Phineas. Is there anyone else who would like to ask a question? Would you like to unmute? We have just a couple of minutes. Also, just a reminder, if you haven't registered, please complete registration by clicking on the link that Melanie's posted in the chat. Anyone has any more questions? Okay, see Irfan and Anele has posted the social media handles. So if you'd like to get in touch with them. Also on that note, since we do have a few minutes, I think quite a few factors did come up this morning. And just a reminder that March is devoted to human rights, and we have a right to education, and we have responsibility to ourselves. I think Anele quite nicely highlighted the importance of healthy relationships. The most important relationship is with yourself. And I think to recognize your worth and your potential and, to fulfill that responsibility. The other message is healing, which is a long-term process, but I think we have to start somewhere. I think on that note, I think let me take the opportunity also to thank our speakers. I'm sure everybody took great value from the content. It was extremely relevant. I also want to just make mention that coming up next week on the 20th, we are hosting a workshop on engaging men and boys. So Irfan, you mentioned that gender-based violence is not just about women. I think Vinyas, you highlighted that as well. So that's an important gap, and that's what we're going to be looking at. And then further on, once we unpack more programs amongst the youth, we're also looking at having a program on transactional relationships. So those are, I think, for me, very relevant and links up nicely with some of the discussions this morning. Thank you, everybody. I'm just quickly taking a glance at the chat to see if there's anything else. Kind of sure. Okay, I will share my email address on the chat. Anele, Irfan, Phineas, do you have anything to add? Closing comments before we close this webinar?
Thank you, Anissa. From my end, it's a very short note of thanks to you and the NSM team. I think very often the caregivers, the activists, the advocates don't get the praise they need to keep going. And my thanks to all of you for the support and for honoring this invite to join us today. So to all the participants, a big thank you, but more importantly to the speakers and to the NSM. Your work is so invaluable to society, and I can't thank you enough for taking this courageous step to do that work. I certainly appreciate it, and I think we should continue to find spaces like this of hope in a time when there's so much despair. And so thank you for building community and for doing the important work you're doing. I am humbled to have been invited to this particular session, and I look forward to learning from the future sessions as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Irfan. Phineas, Anele, any closing comments?
Yeah, I think what I can say, I've been doing this work for 7 years, and I've realized the importance of you can't give from an empty cup, so carers need to be cared for. So I will say to all these amazing people in here who are doing an incredible job to not forget to take care of themselves as they try to take care of others. Is very important as activists that we look after ourselves. And we don't give from a dry place, because then we're gonna end up hurting people. That's why I made a lifetime decision of learning about trauma, so that I don't hurt people in my work as I try to help. So I think it's very important that you always remain teachable in this field and understand that you don't know anything. And continue to learn from others with others. So, but thank you for the invite. I really appreciate it. This was very powerful and very encouraging, because we need more of this. Collectively, we need more of this in this country. So yeah, thank you for the invite.
Certainly is powerful, Phineas, and it begins with us. Thank you. Anele?
I share the sentiments of Irfan and Phineas as well, in showing my gratitude and thanking you for the invite. It was a very fruitful session, but I knew when Irfan reached out to me that I definitely want to participate in this, because I generally trust his recommendations. So thank you, Irfan, for thinking of me, and also just opening me up to this organization, and the work that you're doing. it helps to know that there are other, because I always say we can't be everywhere. So the more people who are able to do the work that we are doing and share in the work that we are doing, that is very helpful, you know. So leaning on each other, like Phineas is saying, is very important. And if I can't do something, I know I can always call on Anissa or Phineas or Irfan to say, can you step in here? I'm unable to, I don't have the capacity to. But I just want to say to everyone who's on the call, you know, this was specifically for young people. So let's ensure that we take the message back to young people and lead them to the messages where they are. They are, like Irfan said, they are on TikTok. So let's find those ways of using TikTok to educate them so that they have the information, you know. And I always think of myself now that there are things that, you know, your parents and your elders said, and at that point when you were young, you were like, oh no, I don't. But now you're like, they were actually right. Maybe if they were just kinder in saying it and they use a different tone, I would have listened better. So our children do listen. They might not do things at the time you say, but they do listen. And one day they'll remember, oh, this was said, and let me now use what my mother, my aunt, my teacher, or whoever said. So it's just being patient with them and knowing that they will do the right thing eventually. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anele. I'm so happy to say that we crammed a lot of information in our time and quite punctually at 10:30. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. We look forward to having you at our future programs. Bye.